Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on the Masechtas Chagigah daf Chaf Aleph. We're going to begin on Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, by the beginning of the Gemara. B'kodesh my time alo. How come, as our Mishnah said at the very beginning of the parak, that when it comes to truma, you can immerse one kli b'toich another kli. It's matbilin kelim b'toich kelim of a loy l'kodesh. If it's not an issue when it comes to truma, so it shouldn't be an issue by kodesh either. So why are we strict? So Amrav Ilah mipnei she kvedai shel kli chaytzetz, because the weight of the inner kli that pushes down, that is going to cause a chatzitza. Says Rashi, kvedo shel kli hapnimi, the inner one, hamachbid al chitzayin shu munach betocha, it's put inside. Chaytzim ne'amayim. So the Gemara is going to ask later on Daf Chaf Beis, which we'll see again on tomorrow's Daf, that if it's an issue of chatzitza, so why are we lenient? It should be usher not just to do it this way, not only by kodesh, but also by truma. So where says 1 second? I'm going to say mishum chatzitza, reishal la mishum chatzitza. We already have a case of chatzitza later on in this Mishnah, so it must be this is a totally different reason. The tiny seifa, v'lokim minisa kodesh minisa truma. Shebi kodesh, when it comes to kodesh, matir, if you have a knot, you have to untie the knot. Umangiv, and then you dry it off. Umatbil, only afterwards you immerse it. V'achach kosher, and then you could retie it. With truma kosher v'achach matbil. When it comes to truma, you can keep it tied if you'd like. It's not an issue. So, l'chayra, we see over here, the Seif is talking about chatzitza, so then why would the Reish be talking about the same thing? Where it says, Reish was Seif mishum chatzitza. You're right. The Reisha and the Seif are both talking about chatzitza, so why do you need two different cases? Utzricha, diashmin Reisha, havamina haino taima, dula kodesh lo, mishum kvedesh shel kli. Because the whole issue is because the weight of the inner kli, therefore it's going to cause a chatzitza, di'ika. That in fact is a legitimate issue. I will say for the lake of kvedesh shel kli. When there's no issue of kvedesh shel kli, there's not a kli inside another kli. It's no weight that's going to cause a chatzitza. Emel kodesh nami will have a chatzitza. Maybe it's not a chatzitza by kodesh. Yashmin emseifa havamina hainu time el kodesh lo. Maybe the reason why it doesn't work by kodesh, mishum, as we continue to chaf album and beis, is for a different reason. Is mishum de kitra b'maya, when you have a knot that is submerged into water, duki mahadik, it ends up becoming tighter. The water causes the knot to get tight, and therefore it's going to be difficult for the water to be able to get inside. And therefore it's a chatzitza. Of a reisha, when it comes to the reisha, the maya akfuye makfule lamana. Actually, the water will surround this kli, will have a chatzitza tzricha. So basically, it's true, even though they're both chatzitza, but they're totally different reasons. One is an issue because of the knots that it's tight based on the water, or the reisha is an issue because of the kvedesh kli. Rabbi Law with Taimei. Rabbi Law goes according to his reason. The Omer Rabbi Law, Omer Chanina Bar Papa, Eser Milo Shanukan. If you count our Mishnah, there's actually 10 situations, 10 cases in which we see the distinction between Truma and Kodesh. So the reality is, if you count them, there's not 10, there's 11. But the point is that it's Eser Milos because these two are similar in that they both have to do with chatzitza. So look at Rashi. The Anan Yud Aleph Tanan Be. Ela Hani Tarti Dechad Tayim Chashuv Gechada. Says Rashi, because they are really the same reason as the issue of chatzitza, so it's considered as one. So what does he say? There's Eser Malos Shanukan. Chamish Rishonais. When it comes to the first 5 that are mentioned, Bein LeKodesh, Bein LeChulin, Shanasu Al Taras Kodesh, we're even strict, not just by Kodesh over Truma, but even when it comes to Chulin, which is used Taras Kodesh, that is even more strict than Truma. Achronos, the last 5, on the other hand, LeKodesh, only when it comes to Dinim of Hekdesh, of a low L'chulin Shanasu Al Taras Kodesh. Now, when it comes to things which are Chulin Shanasu Al Taras Kodesh, the question is why? Why do we say there's a distinction between the first and the second. So we're going to understand this right now. So my timer. So Chamish Kamaisa, the original 5 that are in the Mishnah, the Isli, the Ror, the Tumah B'Daraisa, that it has in them issues and problems of Tumah Deraisa, so it goes over Rabbanan, so the Rabbanan are strict, not only being B'Kodesh, being L'chun Shnasol Taras HaKodesh. Because there is an element of a Derora de B'Mayna, the Derora de Tumah rather, Midaraisa, that there's an issue of a problem Midaraisa of Tumah, as we'll see in Rashi. So therefore, we're strict even by Chulun Shenasol Taras HaKodesh. Basraisa, the last ones, the Leisluhu, the Rara, the Tumah, the Midaraisa, so it goes over Rabbanan HaKodesh only. Chulun Shenasol Taras HaKodesh will goes over Rabbanan. So that is the distinction, which is question 4 over here. Maklal de Milsa. So what is this general rule? So he says like this. Elu diyesh lehem deror de tumah midaraisa goes over him afal chon nasol taras hakodesh. The elu she'en lehem deror tumah midaraisa goes over him kodesh bilvad. So what does that mean? So let's look at Rashi. Rashi explains basically the Mishnah. Deror de tumah deraisa, chashash tumah deraisa. There's a chashash of tumah deraisa. What is that? So let's think about the first one. Kli b'toch kli. Now when it comes to a kli b'toch kli, i'ika chatzitza, if in fact there's an issue of chatzitza, that's a tumah deraisa. That's actually an issue of tumah deraisa. It's mamish not good. Achrayim v'toich, when it comes to if one part becomes tameh, the other ones become tameh by kodesh, not by truma. Afagadav the bekalim shenitmu achoda v'mashkin the tumah derabanan he. Well, the truth is it's only a tumah derabanan. Nonetheless, mihu hadiyam rabbanan mashkin matamin kli. The whole issue of liquids becoming matama kli is mishim gzera de mashka zav v'zavahu. Kagain roika me'araglav. When it comes to their spittle or their urine, so the din is that will actually be matama the kli on a deraisa level. If a zav or zava, their liquid goes onto that kli. V'hani matamin kli midaraisa. So that would be a tumah deraisa. But tumah deraisa ein chiluk b'kli shetef ben achrayim l'toicho shebechol makom l'tumah nogasbo nit b'kula. When it comes to a tumah deraisa, if you touch part of the kli, the whole thing becomes tameh. The whole nafkamina of maybe touching one will not affect everything else. This is why tumah derabanan. But when it comes to tumah deraisa, no. Noisas and medras. When it comes to the issue of medras atuma, nam yichshash tumah deraisa. As we saw in the Gemara before, he says Gemara Maisa Shahaya Shenafla Ritsuas Asanda L'Avir Chavius, that let's say you have a handle, a strap rather, that goes into the air of a barrel, so that could be matamet. Big the oichle truma medras hakodesh shema yoshel and ishtonida. So we said there's an issue of your wife who's in need of sitting. Tatzach is deraisa. Kelim nigmarim, completed vessels. Mishim sinari de amaretz shema zavhu. So again, we're concerned that maybe the amaretz is a zav, which again contracts the tum deraisa. So all these things are considered to be a dorara, an issue of tum deraisa. However, the other ones, which Rashi doesn't go through, those are considered to be tumah derabanan, and therefore we only are geyser on kodesh, but not on chulun shnasu al taras hakodesh. Rabbi Omer. So that is one answer. One answer is that the issue of kli b'to kli is because of chatzitza. Rabbi gives a different answer. Rabbi Omer Medaseifa havi mishum chatzitza, about the knots, which is a chatzitza issue for sure. So Reish la mishum chatzitza. It was a good question. It must be that the Reisha is not about chatzitza. So then what's the whole issue? Reisha had a time of gezer shel yatzbil chatem v'tzinoiris b'klish in b'piv kishveiferes hanoid. The issue is that we do not want a person to immerse pins and sewing needles into a kli which its opening is less than a water pouch. What exactly does this mean? So if you look in Rashi, vahi lav tefilhi, that's not going to be a tefillah. In other words, if you put a needle inside, almost like a little ship, right, inside of a glass bottle. So you stick a needle, and all there is this tiny little opening, but you can easily stick a needle into it. So and then you submerge that vessel. So the problem is that because you have such a small opening, not even the size of kishvei feres hanoid, like a water pouch. So therefore, because of that, the water is not going to properly go into it, and therefore you're not really being toivel these vessels, the ones that are inside. Says Rashi again, v'ahi lav tvilhi de'en hamayim hanechnasim l'saycho chibur l'mei mikvah. It's not a chibur to the mikvah. V'tovu hamachtin el b'miyut mayim shebekli. You're only it's getting a little bit of the water inside, and that's it. So we say it's not considered to be an issue, an element of chibur. Chibur is an important aspect of a mikvah. They have to be connecting. If there's no connection, then not. Okay, so again, so he says it gives a completely different reason. Okay, weiter. Kidit like that which we learned. It says in mikvois, iruv mikvois, in order to be able to connect and join two separate mikvos together, kishvei feres hanoid, and you have this opening, this connection. So it has to be ku'uvia like its thickness. So look in Rashi, Erev mikvois, mikvah chaser besad mikvah shalem, but siner b'nehem hamachabron. So you have one mikvah which is not complete, and you have a mikvah which does have enough, but there's this connection. So the question is, how big does this hole have to be so that it's a chibur to connect to the other mikvah? So it has to be, it's like its thickness, as we continue to Chaf one Aleph, ukechalala, and its area is kabei kashtei etzba'os, like two fingers, chayzer slim kaiman, that can go back to its place. As you can stick two fingers in there and move them around, so that means it's a big enough hole that we say that there's a chibur connecting one mikvah to the other mikvah. Look at Rashi, vehein beis etzba'os chayzer slim kaiman, shani yochel a galgal, can like roll, but chol beis etzba'os lekach tzad have iru. So that's a connection. So Sabal Abaha Kahad the Aimer Rab Nachman Amarabo Barbua Yud Aleph Milos Shanukan. Because according to him, the element of Kli B'Toch Kli has nothing to do with Chatzitza. So therefore there's actually 11 different things that are mentioned in our Mishnah, not 10. And therefore he says like this: Sheish Rishaynos, the first 6 is Bein LeKodesh, Bein L'chulin Shenasu Al Taras HaKodesh. Achronos LeKodesh Avalu L'chulin Shenasu Al Taras HaKodesh. So then the Gemara asks, so my ika bain derava liderav ilah. Okay, fine. In both cases, you're not allowed to be toivel kli b'toch kli when it comes to kodesh, but you are allowed to buy truma. So one says it's because of chatzitza, so one because we're chayshish of if the hole is not kishver feres hanoid. So the question is, what exactly is the practical nafkamim between the two shitas? So so he says the difference is sal vigargusni. If a person has the outer kli, the outer vessel is a basket or some type of like a net, shemalian kalim, and you fill them up with vessels, vadvilan, and you immerse them. So the one who says an issue of chatzitza ika, it's still an issue of chatzitza because they're still touching one another because of kfeder shokli, so the water may not get in as they're pressing one to the other. However, so if the whole issue is because the opening of the outer one is not big enough, so tsalvi gargustoni she'ein befihin kishvafersanoid leka. The issue that it's not big enough, leka, there's no such thing because the hole is large enough, and therefore, according to that, it's acceptable. Yoz the Rabbi Taimei. And Rabbi goes according to his reason. The Rabbi salvi gargustni shemalain kalim. If let's say again you fill it up with vessels, that bilin tahirin. So it says that it's tahar. Umikva. So therefore, what do we see? We see clearly that this is like the second shita. It has nothing to do with. He doesn't hold as an issue of chatzitza. He holds an issue of that the outer kli is too small. Umikva shecholku b'salvi gargusni. If you have a mikvah which is divided by a basket or this net, in that situation, a person who immerses into such a mikveh, it's not a chibor, it doesn't not olos tefillah. The arakula chalchuli mechalchala, because we know that the earth itself, it's considered like it's filled with holes. Also, none. So you can say, oh, so maybe that's good enough. right? Just like all these holes in these nets. Nonetheless, v'inan deika mem sa b'makam echad. There has to be arboim sa in one place, and therefore, if you have this net that separates it, that's an issue, even though, again, you could say, well, what do you mean? The water goes straight through, but it has to be mem sa b'makam echad. So these items, these kalim, will create a separation, and therefore it will not be a good tefillah if you go immerse yourself in the other side. Okay, let's see if there's a couple more questions. Question 5. So when are you allowed to be toivel kli b'toich kli? So first of all, kishapi hachitzain kishvaferes hanoid. So then that's not an issue. I'm not sure why it says l'kait. It should say l'kait. So l'truma, right? So again, if it's the amount that it's already kishvaferes hanoid, so then according to that shita, it's not an issue. So Lamandi Oimer Mishum Gezera Shema Yatbil Mechitan Mesinaris Bekli Shein Befi Kishveres Hanoid Savigur Gostani Shein Befim Kishveres Hanoid Leka. That's not something which is a true reality of an issue, so therefore it's not a problem. Okay, let's see a couple more questions. Maybe TA 10. Be'er explain Maha Machlokus Im Eser Milas Shanu B'chaymer b'kodesh o yud alf miles. Great question. So the answer is, then I guess you can almost say that's the nafkamin also in our Mishnah, but it's not really true. There's no real nafkamin between this. But the point is the kli b'toich kli is the issue. Let me just do this. TA 10 is the whole problem of kli b'toich kli chatzitza. If it's so, then it's only 10 miles. However, on Chapez Amud Aleph, if you hold Yud Aleph miles shanukan, that's because it's actually two separate reasons. So the reisha is not because of chatzitza, and therefore that's the reason why it says it that way. Let's see how he writes it. This was question 10. Imatam shein matbilan kel b'toch kelim mishum chatzitza dechvedu shel kli imkein harizeh nimnu in matir menagav line, and it's yud. V'im hatam mishum shlo yatbil machne v'sineres b'kli shein b'fiv kishveiferes hanoid harizeh nimnu l'mayla bifnei atzmo. It's considered to be all by itself. Okay, TB 10. B'ma hakil chachamim b'tumos mashkin to divrayim. In what way are we more makel when it comes to mashkin tameim? So we saw this Rashi kishetame shahatuma shenagam achori kli. If you touched the outside, ein matamas toichai. It's not matam the inside. With truma. We also came the idea shetumazu midvrayim. For yisru leha truma v'kodshim. So again, that's the significant reason why, as we saw this din of acharayim v'toich is dafka in a situation when we are talking about a tuma d'Rabbanan. But a tuma d'Oraisa, it all spreads completely. But by tuma d'Rabbanan, we're more lenient, and we say that when you touch one, it's not necessarily matama the other. Again, because otherwise, if it becomes if it's a tuma d'Oraisa, we know that there's a chiyuv of sreifa. They actually have to burn the truma. You have to burn the kodshim. However, if it's a din d'Rabbanan, so we're not going to burn the truma or the kodshim. So that's why we make a chiluk between touching the inside, touching part of it if it spreads to the other. Again, that's only by truma we have that kula. Let's conclude by looking at Rabbi Gibber's test. So he says, "My taima in matbilin kubeto kli kaidish." Question 56 and 57. The kli inside you press against the outer kli will make a chatzitza. Or gezer b'shveiferes hanoid. You might see the toivel and he'll be toivel and the whole less than 2 fingers. Okay. Ma nafkamina bin atamid el. If you're toivel in a big basket, still it's a problem of chatzitza. but not of kishveres hanoid, since all the baskets are bigger, have bigger holes than that. Ad kan.